If you are ready to start leveraging the power of Airtable Automation, you have come to the right place. In this video, we're going to be breaking down how Airtable Automation can be built in the background of your Airtable databases so that your repetitive tasks are done automatically without even needing you to think about them. If that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth. I own Gap Consulting, and we've made it our mission to help you get organized and automated with no-code tools. Airtable is one of our favorite no-code tools, and we are going to be focusing on automation specifically in this video. Now, before we get going, I want to invite you to join me for a much more advanced automation training. If you love what you learn about in this video, you will definitely want to take the next step and go further down the automation rabbit hole within no-code tools. I've put together a training that is going to help give you the building blocks that you need to really understand and leverage all of the fundamental pieces of no-code automation. So grab that training if you're interested at garethpronovost.com/webinar-registration, and we'll deliver that to you in your inbox. But without further ado, let's hop on into the heart of the video where we are talking about the basics behind Airtable Automation. Now, the first thing to understand before you get to automating anything in Airtable, you have to first start with your structure, your data schema inside of your Airtable database. There are two key takeaways here for automation. Number one, you have to have a place for the data to live. It has to go somewhere and has to be structured properly so that your data is talking to itself. So first focus on the structure. Now, the second piece of automation is you have got to be able to clearly articulate what you're trying to do. If you can't put into simple terms what you do, then there's no way that you can build an automation to tell a computer to do it for you. You have to be able to articulate what it is you do, otherwise you don't really have a clear process established, and that is a non-starter for automation. Now, assuming that you have these two pieces in place, let's move on. So here I am in my projects table. So here I've imagined that I have 3 different projects and they've been assigned to somebody and they have a status. And if I were to flip over to my second table, I have tasks. So here we're tracking some tasks. We say, hey, look, we've got these 5 steps that have to be gone through. They are connected to or linked to a project, and someone's in charge of these steps, and we can track to see if these things have been completed or not. So how can an automation help us here? Well, it looks like we have a bit of a template. We have the same 5 things that are created every time. So why don't we leverage this information, and rather than manually creating these tasks every time, we can build an automation to do that for us. Now we need to navigate over to our automations. So head up to the toolbar at the very top and select automations. Now, once inside here, we're first asked to add a trigger. Now, if you've built no-code automations before, you should be fairly comfortable with the way that this is structured. A trigger is simply the thing that will awaken our automation. So you can think of an automation as just hanging out, laying dormant, and it waits until the trigger conditions are met. Once the trigger conditions are met, that automation wakes up and it goes to work doing the things that you've programmed it to do. So the trigger is simply the thing that we're establishing that is going to awaken our automation when the time comes. In our case, we might suggest that we need to fill out a project, and when the project is filled out completely, then we want it to create tasks automatically. So let's say, for example, when a record matches conditions, and we're going to tell it to look at our projects table, and so we're selecting from a drop-down our different tables. And now we can establish the conditions for the automation. So condition 1, for example, might be that the start date exists. If the start date is empty, then that basically means that this project hasn't been scheduled yet. So it would be really hard to schedule some tasks against the project, given that it's not completed and set in stone. Additionally, we might insist that the person in charge is not empty as well. If we haven't assigned somebody to the project, then how in the world can we move forward and create tasks assigning them to anybody? So you get the idea. We can establish whatever conditions we want here that says once a record goes from not meeting these conditions and switches over to then meeting these conditions, that will awaken our automation and our trigger will be activated. So So the next step now is to actually choose a record inside of our database that meets these conditions. So we might want to walk through project 2, and we're going to basically carry project 2 through the next steps of the automation, and we're going to see data from it that we can use in upcoming action steps. So now that we've established our trigger, let's move forward and establish our first action. The action step is going to be the thing that the automation actually does. So in our case, we want to create a task record. So I will say add action. Now before we move on with our example, I want to point out that there are many third-party tools that you can leverage within your Airtable automations. That includes Slack, MS Teams, Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Forms and Sheets and Docs, GitHub, we've got Salesforce, Jira, Twitter, Facebook, Outlook. You get the idea. There are many, many third-party tools that you can integrate with so that you can perform automations between your applications, and it can all exist natively inside of your Airtable automation. For our example though, we're sticking Airtable onto Airtable. Something happens in our project and then we create some tasks in Airtable. So let's scroll back up to the top and create a record. So here we're going to create a record in our tasks table. And when we create this record, we'll need to add certain information to it. So the first part is going to be the name of the task. It's going to be onboard new client. So I've just copied and pasted that in from another screen. Now the next part will be what project is this assigned to? This is where we can access information that occurred earlier in our automation. So for us, the project that we want this new task assigned to is going to be the project that triggered the automation. So here we're actually able to access information from previous steps in the automation. So we might say, well, in the trigger that set forth the automation, we want to grab that project, and we know it's the same project by snagging that record ID. So we can add other information as well. Who's in charge here, for example? So we could select somebody from the drop-down, and this is statically done, meaning that every time this is created, it's going to assign that person right there. But we might also choose to bring in dynamic data. Dynamic data is data that's going to change every time the automation runs, depending on what's happened previously in the automation. In order to access dynamic data, we can hit the gear right here, and this gives us the capabilities of choosing from previous steps in the automation, just as we did with our project where we linked to the project that triggered the automation. Now, if we open this up again, we can scroll down and see that there was somebody assigned as the person in charge. So we could actually use the person in charge from the trigger of the automation and include them on the tasks that we're creating based on what we found in the initial step. So I'll use that user ID right here. And lastly, we don't want to add the completed field because this task has not yet been completed. Now to close this particular action up, we can go down and generate a preview so we can make sure that everything is lining up properly. And of course, we have success here. It would give us the new name, it would assign us to project 2, and it would make Gareth the person in charge because Gareth is the person in charge for the overall project. So very simple to now recreate this. We can just duplicate this action. We can go back to our data schema and decide what are the other elements here. So collect the work agreement, for example, head on back to our automations, and all I have to do is update the name of this particular piece because everything else is the same. I want it to attach to the same project. I want to make the same person in charge. And so this is how I can quickly go through and add all the different elements of this example. Once I'm happy with this, rename our automation and be sure to turn it on. And then of course we want to give it a test. Now remember that this automation will trigger when a start date is not empty and a person in charge is not empty. So let's go back now to our data and make sure that it works like we would plan. So on our projects table, we can add a new project and we can give it a start date. I'll pick today's date. And once we assign it a person in charge, this will then trigger our automation. And we'll watch right here on our linked tasks to see if new tasks are created and added to this project. Just like that, you see that they were. If I flip into my tasks table, I will be able to see those 2 new tasks. They were properly assigned to me because I'm the person in charge on the project, and they are properly linked to the project. So this gives you an idea about how you can build automations. Remember, every automation starts with one trigger and then has to have at least one action. Although in our case, you saw that we were able to add multiple action steps, and you can do the same with your automations. Whatever things you want them to do after they have been awakened and triggered, that's where you build your action steps. I hope you got a ton of value from this video. If you want to learn more, don't forget to check out the training that I mentioned at the beginning. And of course, subscribe to this channel if you want to stay up on top of no-code news just like this. That's it for this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. In the meantime, keep on building.